Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed through the Limerick Township YouTube page, and the link can be found on our Facebook page. This time, I ask everyone to please rise for the pledge. Our first order of business will be the consideration of minutes from the March 12th, 2026 meeting. No? At this time, I would like to bring a consideration of the minutes from March 12th, 2026. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have any public or commission comments from the minutes? All right, seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
In favor.
Aye. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn over the meeting to the township solicitor to go over a few ground rules.
Thank you. As the chair said, we just have a couple of housekeeping items to address. Tonight, the applicant for MCD 7 LLC will be presenting their conditional use application to the Limerick Township Planning Commission. By way of background, the Planning Commission is an appointed body of Limerick residents authorized by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Code, or MPC, as I'm sure you've all heard it called, to assist the elected body with land development, zoning ordinances, and in this case, review of a conditional use application. So for tonight, the commission will hear the application, and then they have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant, Mr. Campbell over there. They'll hear public comment, and at the end, they have the opportunity to vote and make a recommendation to the elected Board of Supervisors on the application. This could include any recommended conditions for the board to consider if the applicant meets the terms of the conditional use ordinance. This commission is comprised of residents who are volunteering their time. Please respect that. By way of background, again, conditional use. It's a use in the township zoning ordinance that is permitted by law if an applicant meets the standards. Tonight's hearing is extremely crowded, which is why we're here at the 9th grade center. The school's been kind enough to allow the township to meet here tonight, and we must end by 9:30, so we'll be trying to move along, and we're going to ask for cooperation from the public. Please be respectful for speakers. If the applicant or planning commission members are unable to conduct their business, we need to stop the meeting, and which leaves less time for public comment. With regard to public comment, it will be limited to Limerick Township residents only. This is permitted by the Sunshine Act and Pennsylvania law. It will be 2 minutes per speaker. Again, you must be a Limerick resident or taxpayer. And there are many of you here tonight that may share the same thoughts or ideas. The Planning Commission's respectfully going to ask you to not say the same thing that your neighbor or the person in front of you said. We want to make sure as many of you have the opportunity to share a new idea or a new thought rather than the same thing. Again, keep in mind, 100 people saying the exact same thing is a little less impactful than people sharing new ideas. Obscenities, yelling, and being disrespectful will not be tolerated. But at this point, I will turn the mic over to Mr. Campbell and his team.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Edmund Campbell and I represent MCD 7. They're the applicant. To my left is AJ Magnata. He is the project manager. We have via Teams 2 additional members of our team. Okay. Is that better? There we go. To my left is AJ Magnata. He's the project manager from Labella Engineering. With us via Teams, I don't know if you can see up there, we've got Ben Mueller and Vasco Roma. They are 2 experts. Ben is an acoustician who will talk to us about sound and noise. And Vasco is an expert in emissions and will talk to us about how we intend to manage emissions, both of which are requirements under the ordinance. What's up on the screen at the moment is, I believe, the original site plan that we submitted back in December. And it is generally accurate. We have submitted a revised plan, and I'm going to ask AJ. AJ, you have a laser pointer? Thanks. So, AJ, what are we looking at on the screen right now?
So this is the, sorry.
Actually, you have one. Oh, we can share.
So this is a layout of the data center campus. Down here in the bottom left, just off the page, is the Limerick nuclear power plant. Here's Evergreen Road, Lightcap Road here. This is the mall that's in this area. Coming in, the main entrance will be coming off of Lightcap Road at the signalized intersection, which will be in here. And then to enter this section of the campus, there'll be a secondary main entrance on off this side, off the east side of the property. And then back in the southern portion of the property, there will be the utility switch yard where PECO will be pulling off of the 500 kV line, which will then get put down to this 230 kV substation. And then there'll be an overhead line to this user substation, and then the wires will be underground from that point.
All right, so there are 8 rectangular buildings that are in orange on the plan. What are those? Are they the data halls or the data centers themselves?
So the orange rectangles are the data halls themselves. There's the
Could I ask you both to put your mics a little closer? It's very difficult for us to hear you, and I'd imagine for the audience as well.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm seeing nods, yes. Speak up, speak loud. I know I'm obnoxious. Do the same.
No, it's okay. Good enough? Okay, so the orange rectangular boxes here are the data halls themselves where the computers will be stored and operated, and the cooling equipment. You have these pink areas on the side, which would be the office space, and these gray areas on the back side is the utility yard where the UPS equipment is and the back standby generators, stuff like that.
So there are 8 orange rectangles, correct?
Yes,
And 5 of them have the same dimensions. 5 of them are approximately 155,000 square feet footprints, correct?
yes,
And then 3 of them are about 203,000 square feet, correct?
yes,
And those are designed to be 2 stories in height.
correct.
We say 2 stories, but the reality is they're probably about 80 feet in height.
85 foot max.
Okay. And you mentioned chilling equipment or chillers. Each one of those buildings will have approximately 40 chillers on the rooftop, correct?
Yes,
And those rooftop chillers will be screened by parapets or other equipment so they can't be seen?
correct.
All right. Now, immediately adjacent to each of the orange rectangles, there's an area in gray. You talked about that briefly, but what term do you use to describe those gray rectangles that are immediately adjacent to each of the orange rectangles?
That'll be the utility yard.
Okay. And euphemistically calling it a utility yard, that's where there will be generators located, correct?
Correct.
All right. And each one of those buildings has approximately 35 or 36 generators, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And I believe each of the buildings has about 46 or 48 chillers on each rooftop, correct?
yes.
All right.
One quick thing I forgot to mention, these blue areas would be reserved for stormwater detention. And then there is a logistics building on this corner here and an administration building down in here. The light blue is the existing floodplain and stream.
Okay. Excuse me for one moment.
Sure. And the thick red line is the property boundary, the overall property boundary.
Can you indicate with the pointer where Possum Hollow Road currently is?
Possum Hollow Road cuts down through here.
Okay. And my clients bought a portion of this property from a prior developer who was contemplating moving Possum Hollow Road, correct?
Yes,
Can you outline where Possum Hollow Road is proposed to be relocated from and to?
So, yes, instead of bisecting through the property, it would be Saratoga Road would come up here, and then, where are we at?
Yep.
Come here, and then down here where it is existing, and then Light Cap would be extended across and up.
So in other words, there's a road that bisects the site essentially parallel to the creek, and that road would be then rerouted around the perimeter of the project, correct?
Yes.
I think when we were introduced, someone mentioned that there are 7 lots that are associated with the application. One of those lots is on Zara Drive. The address, I think, is 1192 Zara Drive. Can you roughly indicate where that is on the plan?
Right there, right?
All right. Now, that particular lot is not in the zoning district which permits data centers, correct?
Yes.
Is there any data center halls or any data center buildings located there?
No.
Is it accurate to say that the only reason that's included in the application is because of the anticipated redesign and movement of Possum Hollow Road?
Correct.
Okay. And we would agree as a condition, if we were to be approved, that there would be no data center and no data center equipment on that lot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about where the Pico substation would likely be. Can you locate that?
Mhm.
Right. So that substation would either be owned and or leased and operated by Pico, correct?
Yes.
What's the purpose of that substation?
So the switch yard, as I kind of mentioned before, it's taking this high voltage off the main feed coming from the nuclear power plant, gets diverted into here, and at that point, it steps down to 230 kV, and then at this utility substation, which then gets transferred to our user substation.
There's a pump station shown on the plan. Can you point out where that is?
Yes.
It's a small little.
Yes, it's a submersible pump station. What the function of that would be to take the existing sewage collection system coming out of the shops. Right now, comes down and bisects the property, and then there's a main that follows, a 15-inch sewer main that follows the creek. What that's going to do is that's going to intercept all that flow and then push it around the property back into the main interceptor here.
So the pump station doesn't necessarily serve the data center. The pump station is serving and providing service to existing users, correct?
Correct.
Right. And that pump station will actually be under the surface of the ground?
Yes, it'll be a submersible pump station.
All right. And are you familiar with pump stations and how they operate at a general level?
Yes.
Do they create any noise?
No.
Okay.
All the mechanical equipment will be down 10, 15 feet in the wet well.
All right. Are there any natural gas pipelines on the site?
Yes.
Can you show me where they are, where they're indicated now?
There's an existing pipeline that bisects the property through here, and then another pipeline that crosses right here.
Are we encroaching on either of those pipelines, or do we have to move them?
The main cutting through here is going to have to be bypassed around and reconnected.
Okay.
The other one will not be altered.
And we will, in the one instance, because we're not moving it, we're avoiding it. In the other instance, it will be moved and it won't be encroached, correct?
Yes.
All right. Are we going to be drawing any water other than what's available from the public water system to operate this data center?
We are not.
Okay. There's a discussion, if you read in social media, about two different types of cooling systems, one of which uses a significant amount of water and one which does not. Are we using a closed loop system or an open loop system to manage the data center?
This project will operate on a closed loop system.
So we've included in our application a letter from the water utility company indicating that we have available to us about 750,000 gallons per day, correct?
Yes,
But by virtue of using a closed-loop system, we'll use a fraction of that number, correct?
correct.
Correct. And depending on the types of systems, is it fair to say that well, we'll be using substantially less than that number, correct?
Yes, on an average, it'll be 5,000 gallons per day per building, 40,000 gallons for the whole facility.
Okay. So if it was double or triple that
Could you
amount-
please repeat that? We had a difficult time hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
I want to, Mr. Magnotta testified that the estimate could be as low as 5,000 gallons per day per building. So that would be 40,000 gallons. I will tell you that, candidly, I think we need the flexibility to go higher than that. But you'd still be well under 100,000 gallons, which would be about a residential development of maybe 400 homes. I mean, that's the quality, that's the level of water we're talking about. We're not talking about using water from the aquifer. We're not talking about drawing down water from the river. We're relying completely on the public water system. And although the utility has told us there's 750,000 gallons per day, what will be used will be a fraction of that. A closed-loop system does not require additional water, correct?
Correct.
It's tapped off or filled once, correct?
Yes,
And then from time to time, just like a car radiator, you may need to add additional water, but it doesn't use continual water to cool using an evaporative process, correct?
right. There is loss through the system,
But it's
But-
de-
primarily through it.
it's a de minimis amount of additional water that's required, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about sewage. Is there anything unusual or unique about the sanitary sewer flow that will come from a site like this?
No, aside from, there'd be domestic wastewater from the, just the office space, and then there's some, what you call it, just blow down water, which is pretty much clean water from the evaporative system that'll be going to the system as well.
Can we, I believe we estimate that each building may have between 50 and 60 employees over an entire day, but that would be broken down into shifts, correct?
Correct, over 3 shifts.
So how much parking is available at each one of those buildings?
There's about, I believe, 40 spaces per building.
Is there adequate parking to support the number of employees who will be there on a given day, given the fact that they're going to be in multiple shifts?
Yes, the parking is adequate for employees plus deliveries and maintenance.
So the ordinance itself goes through in some detail the bulk and area requirements that we are required to meet in order to get approval for a data center. And we have a review back from the township's engineer evaluating that, correct?
Yes,
I don't want to go through each of them, but in general terms, do we comply with the bulk and area requirements imposed by the ordinance in order to have a data center approved?
yes,
And by bulk and area requirements, we're talking about things like lot size, minimum setbacks, building height, impervious coverage, building coverage, correct?
correct.
Okay. And so we're not asking for any variances or any deviations from those standards, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. The Pannoni review letter talks about the fact that some of the facility encroached upon steep slopes. Can you describe how we've addressed that?
Yes. So the stormwater basins and the encroachment was on the steep slopes was just within these 3 stormwater basins. Since in the later revision, they've been adjusted and shifted to be outside of that steep slope area.
So we no longer encroach on any steep slopes, correct?
Correct.
There are also comments in the review letter about encroachments in the floodplain. Can you point out to where those floodplain encroachments are noted?
So there would be 2 stream crossings here that would be within the floodplain area. There's also would be an underground duct bank for the power service here and here.
Okay. And is there a driveway or a cartway which encroaches in the floodplain?
Yeah, there was a small piece here, but that's been shifted since.
Right. So in the subsequent plan that's been submitted, you eliminated and removed the cartway or driveway that encroaches in the floodplain, correct?
Correct.
Now, let's talk about the other encroachment to the floodplain, which are duct banks. What are duct banks?
So duct banks are essentially large underground culverts that carry electrical wires. And just think of a rectangular box, and there's different ducts that go through it, just pipes, and then the wires get fed through that.
So on the exhibit that's on the screen, it looks like they're crossing over those creeks. They'll actually run under the creeks, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so will there be, the ordinance requires that areas in floodplain be required to remain, although it doesn't define the term green space, it says they've got to remain as green space. Will there be any permanent disturbance of the surface of the floodplain to detract from its quote-unquote green space characteristics?
No, once the duct bank's installed, then the surface is restored to the previous channel cross-section.
Is any part of the floodplain going to be piped?
Because of the duct banks, no.
Yeah. Are we proposing to pipe any of the floodplain?
If you do the driveway crossing, yes.
Right. But in the subsequent plan, we removed the driveway, correct?
Correct.
Right. How about piping, culverting, or diverting any of the floodplain?
No.
Right. And so since the ducts are going to be under the floodplain, and since there'll be no disturbance of the green space character, and since there's going to be no piping, diverting, or filling of the floodplain, do you believe we need any zoning relief for those underground ductwork?
No.
Okay. And the building that's up to the right can be accessed, correct, directly either from Lightcap or, yeah, right there, right?
Correct.
Okay. So at a high level, those are the questions that I have for Mr. Magnata, giving an overview of the project. I'd be happy to offer him for questions about the site plan itself.
Do you want to take questions now or all at once from the Planning Commission members? The way we had thought it would roll is you put your presentation on, then
That's fine. I can go to our sound expert next.
will your other experts, will everyone be available at the end of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I don't know if you can, Mr. Mueller, are you with us? Thanks. Hi, Ben. Can you hear me?
Ben, can you hear?
I can, yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. So, Ben, what do you do for a living?
I am a principal of Ostergaard Acoustical Associates. We're an acoustic consulting firm located in Woodbridge, New Jersey. And my background is a degree in mechanical engineering, both undergrad and graduate. And my graduate degree has a concentration in noise and vibration control. And I've been working in the field of acoustics for the past 27 years now.
Ben, I'm going to ask you to speak slower because as you speak, there's a little bit of reverb. So if you can speak a little more deliberately and a little bit slower, I think it'll be a little bit clearer.
Understood.
Thanks. What were you asked to do in relation to this project?
Sure. So this is something similar to what we work on routinely. In fact, data centers are becoming very popular for prospective design. what we start off looking at first is what's our criteria and what is our local or state noise codes that apply to project site sound. So for here, we don't have too much in the way of the state, but from the township, we have Chapter 122, Peace and Good Order, and we also have Chapter 184 under the zoning code that prescribes directions on how to mitigate and deal with site sound emissions.
And did we provide you with a copy of the site plan and the potential layout for this site?
Yes.
And did you evaluate or model what's anticipated in terms of sound to be generated from this site?
Correct. We look at this as one of the other disciplines might, with the focus of course on sound. So we look at, we heard some previous discussion about chillers on the rooftop. Emergency generators are also a major noise source associated with data centers. And then we have some minor sources such as rooftop units and exhaust fans that serve some of the smaller spaces.
Okay. What does the ordinance require us to do at this part of the process?
Sure. So they provide limits that are to be met at our site property line during the daytime hours, which are defined in the ordinance a little bit more convoluted for me to explain, but it's during certain weekday daytime hours and then some weekend hours. But essentially during the daytime, our limit is 67 at our property line. And then during the nighttime, as well as all day Sunday, that limit is reduced to 57 at our property line. And the difference there is to be more sensitive for nighttime quieter conditions.
How is it that you prepare a model to predict what those sounds will be?
Sure. So acoustics and noise is just one of the sciences. So we very much understand how sound falls off with distance. We very much understand how loud a chiller is. In industry, a lot of the manufacturers readily provide sound data for their products for comparisons and studies such as this. So a lot of this is known, and we just put it together in the configuration that's proposed by the project in order to look at how that sound might propagate off-site.
Okay. And did you prepare a model in this instance for this case?
Yes, we did.
And based on those models, do you believe that the project will comply with the daytime and evening noise limitations imposed by the ordinance?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is what the project is being designed to fully comply with. I should step back 1 second, as the ordinance has some other provisions that I think would be helpful to be discussed. We are at the stage right now where we have provided a preliminary sound study, and that preliminary sound study is as we can understand, the project has not been fully designed. We don't know the make and the model. We don't know the color of paint. There's a lot of things that are in the air. And so our directive now with the preliminary study is to put together an equipment configuration that we would find typical and representative of a project of this nature and orientation. And so what we have in our preliminary model is a high-level representation, a broad brush, if you will, of the ability of a project of this caliber to comply with the local noise ordinance. The noise ordinance also has two other sections that are next in the process. So the first, or I guess part two, which we would see during the local approval before the planning and zoning boards, but then we would be required to have an updated sound study at that time, which the design will be further along, and I think we'll have more specific faces and names of equipment known at that point. And then the third section, or third part of the noise ordinance requires a post-construction evaluation. So after we go through the process to improve the confidence that our project will indeed meet code, there is that third part that comes into play to formally do a sound study or survey of existing as-built conditions to yet again prove that the design was accurate and reasonable to comply with local ordinance.
So to recap that, there's actually 3 studies that will be required. We're talking tonight about the first of those 3, which is part of the conditional use application. But when we come back in for land development, it needs to be studied and modeled again. And then when it's up and operational, there has to be additional studies to confirm that compliance has been achieved, correct?
Correct.
And in your field of study, in your work, how often do you model what sounds are going to occur from an industrial development?
Basically every project. It is the foremost ability to do our forecasting and predicting. I think you see it shown in our other disciplines with our traffic engineer or with the stormwater calculations, and we're all basically trying to understand what's going to be like upon completion. And so the modeling that we do has a level of conservatism factored in, and what we find is that when it's actually built, the objective, of course, is to have a greater margin of compliance than what was modeled, and to have a better confidence of that this is going to be reality. So there's a very strong element of our work that has to have a conservative slant, so that we make sure, as you see with the 3 tiers of sound studies required for this project, to ensure that we get it right.
And for the purpose of this study, you're using the most conservative elements or the most conservative presumptions to predict the sound that's going to occur?
Correct. And that also accounts for maybe not taking credit for certain elements that might be present in reality. And I think that's also, in part, the conservatism is also why, as a preliminary sound study, we're essentially showing that the project is able to hit the code at multiple locations. That wasn't done on purpose, but as a broad brush stage 1, we have shown that the project of this caliber would be able to comply with that code limit.
The methods that you use, the standards that you apply, are they generally accepted in your industry and in your science?
Yes, absolutely.
And how reliable is your ability to predict what the actual sound will be?
Very, especially with respect to a data center. There aren't too many moving parts here. This isn't like trying to understand how a warehouse truck facility might work, which is obviously more dynamic. So we have a number of units that are operating at the same time, and we assume they're at their maximum level, and that's how we proceed with looking at evaluation of the acoustical model.
Okay. Is vibration, or the concept of vibration, related to noise?
Yes, it is. So airborne vibration of particles is what we hear as sound. But when we have a vibration of particles that are within a structure, that would then transform into vibration.
Do you expect that the operation of this data center is going to result in perceptible vibration off of the property?
Right. Well, acceptable. It'll be non-detectable. Really, there aren't any known vibration issues with the units associated with data centers, regardless of the quantity. we have a substantial amount of distance and separation between the site and off-site receptors.
You submitted a report, and then you saw the township's engineer's comments about your report, correct?
Yes, I have.
And we've asked you to prepare a supplement or to reply to that, but is there anything in the township's engineer's comments about your report that you believe we can't comply with?
No, I don't think so. You know, a lot of the comments were asking for greater detail, which is very appreciated. They were looking for making sure that the sound study included the smaller noise sources, such as the rooftop units and such as the exhaust fans that might be present on the smaller buildings like the administration building. It was also looking to have a greater significant digit presented in our results, which we're more than happy to comply with, although we round up specifically as part of our act of conservatism. There was also a request to introduce additional locations, which I am more than happy to do. I believe that we would want to have some dialogue so that we make sure we get those additional locations correct the first time.
Okay.
And there was also a discussion about the tolerance of sound in general, as well as in terms of our part 3, which would be the sound survey. And while I generally have no concerns with the comments there, I think that it's helpful to discuss at this point that even mechanical high-tech equipment such as a sound level meter does have some plus or minus in tolerance. And so while we are aiming for specific project goals and code limits, that the idea would be that there is at least a factor of safety in there so that we can ensure that those tolerances all result in a positive outcome. The only thing to discuss in terms of compliance with the comments is there seems to have been a request to have a more robust vibration analysis similar to what we've provided and are doing currently from a sound point of view. And while something like that is doable, it is something that is typically tasked in a more complex scenario. So a vibration analysis would normally be used for when we are doing construction work adjacent to a historic preservation building. And a normal numbers vibration analysis is not typically done or carried out for 99% of the projects we work on. Manufacturers develop their products. So let's say, for example, a generator, and then they design a generator to be properly isolated so that it doesn't shake itself to pieces and that it has a longevity for the end user. And that in itself, those engineering practices are more than sufficient to make sure that there isn't any tangible vibration off-site. The products that we may get involved with that have vibration off-site would be railroad crossings or railroad corridors and things of that nature. I don't know that anyone has first-person experience with any other development in town that is causing shaking or physical disturbances of vibration off-site. So I think that while the criteria, the code has asked for that there are not perceptible vibrations off-site, I think that we would hopefully help to support that through just a general narrative,
right, rather
than with formulas and math. But that is something that we will follow up with the comments as well.
So, sort of in layman's terms, the nature of the data center, the computer equipment and the generators and the chillers necessarily require an environment with de minimis or no vibration for that equipment to work effectively and efficiently over a long period of time, correct? Meaning the design elements of the data center itself address the issue of vibration so that vibration is not perceptible without a high-tech monitor off-site.
That's correct. There are so many different pieces involved here that they need to not interfere with each other negatively, and so I think that they come along for the ride by not producing significant vibration that would be an off-site concern.
Okay. Thank you. If we're going to go to the next witness, I'll go to Vasco Roma. Vasco, can you hear me? You can. I'd like you to stay with us, Ben, but you can stay with us. You can close your screen. Vasco, can you introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit there.
I'll speak slower. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Vasco Roma. I'm a senior managing consultant with Ramble. We're a global consulting and engineering firm. I've been an environmental consultant for the past 20 plus years. My focus has been primarily, if not exclusively, on air permitting and compliance, working with a variety of industries, including data centers, power generation, and a number of other industrial facilities.
Vasco, I'm going to ask you to also speak more deliberately and slower. We can hear you well, but the slower you speak, the clearer you come through. What's your role in this project? What did we ask you to do?
Yeah, so I was asked to essentially assess the project's ability to comply with the township's industrial standards as they pertain to air quality and emissions.
And is that the type of exercise that you typically perform for clients?
Yes, we do this pretty much for every project. It's a key step in permitting a new source of emissions. We have to understand and be able to demonstrate compliance with applicable standards, whether it's at the township level, state level, or federal level.
What did you look at in order to evaluate the impact of emissions from this project?
Yeah, so we based it on my experience permitting numerous data centers, the type of emissions associated with data centers, the size of the proposed project, and also understanding the permitting process in Pennsylvania and how that essentially ensures compliance or really demands compliance with many of these standards in order for the state agency to issue approval for construction.
Did you review the township's ordinance as it relates to emission control?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. Did you review the township's ordinance as it relates to emissions? Try again.
Yes, please.
Did you review the township's ordinance as it relates to emissions?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also review the material that was submitted as part of the application describing the number and types of generators that will be on site?
Correct, yes.
And tell me about the process you used to evaluate that proposed use and how it relates to the emission standards.
Sure, yeah, we typically, for a project that's at this stage, we'll use estimates of emissions for engines that are similar to the proposed engines, as well as some operating assumptions in terms of duration of operations, and essentially develop an inventory of what would be the facility-wide emissions for the project.
I mean, you understand these generators to be backup generators, correct?
Correct.
Which means that they will only operate either for the purpose of testing or in the event of a power blackout, correct?
That's correct, yeah. These would operate in the event of a power outage, and for non-emergency operations like maintenance or testing that's required to maintain these engines, they would be significantly limited by federal regulation and state regulation in terms of the number of hours that they could operate, again, outside of emergencies.
What type of permits will the applicant be required to get in order to operate those generators?
I apologize that I couldn't get that.
Sure. What permit will be required for the applicant to get in order to operate the generators?
So in order to not just operate, but even begin construction of the generators under Pennsylvania regulations, they would be required to obtain a construction permit or a plan approval, as it's called in Pennsylvania. That process requires that the facility demonstrate that they are able to comply with all applicable air quality standards and how they will comply with those standards. Those requirements then become part of the construction permit as a condition for constructing and operating the data center. And then in addition to having those conditions for construction, the agency will typically include numerous requirements for monitoring, testing of emissions, reporting, record keeping, in order to ensure continued compliance with those requirements.
Sometimes that's referred to as a Title V permit.
Initially for construction and initial operation, it would be a plan approval construction permit. And then within 120 days typically of the startup of the data center, they would be required to obtain an operating permit. Depending on a number of factors, that operating permit could be a state operating permit, or it could be a Title V operating permit. In any case, that process would require first that the facility certify that they are in compliance with all requirements. That would trigger an inspection by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And then at that point, they would be cleared to obtain an operating permit that would allow for continued operation beyond the temporary permit that's issued for construction.
Do the township's standards for emissions, do they impose greater standards, or are the state standards that you've been talking about encompass the township standards?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. The township standards, or I should say the state standards, are at least as stringent and often more stringent than the township standards. And then, of course, the township standards themselves also incorporate applicable state and federal requirements. So effectively, the process of demonstrating compliance with the applicable requirements to obtain a construction permit is going to cover the industrial standards and beyond that.
Do you have any doubt or hesitation that the data center as proposed can meet those state and federal standards?
No, I don't. And I mean, I can answer this in two different ways. If there was an issue, or if there was an inability to comply with these standards that are imposed by Pennsylvania, there would be no issuance of a construction permit. But I have not seen any indication that there would be an issue with complying with those standards for this project.
Are those standards designed to make sure that the public's health and safety are protected?
That's correct. Yeah, they are driven by both the Federal Clean Air Act as well as the Pennsylvania Air Pollution Control Act, which are designed to be essentially protective of human health and the environment.
And are you confident that by demonstrating compliance with those standards, including the township standards, that the data center can operate safely without a negative impact resulting from emissions?
Yes, and they will certainly operate within these health protective standards.
The I shared with you where we had a discussion earlier about Tier 2 and Tier 4 generators, correct?
Correct.
And the selection of those types of generators will likely be driven by the process that you just described in terms of obtaining those permits, correct?
That's correct, yeah. There are a few steps during the permitting process where that is going to come into play, one of which is a Pennsylvania-specific requirement where the agency requires that facilities demonstrate that their emission pollution controls represent what they call best available technology. So that could, at that point, require Tier 4 equivalent emissions. But yes, it is something that is going to be driven by the permitting process.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roma. Those are the questions I have for Mr. Roma. My traffic engineer is supposed to be here at 7:30. So, there's a traffic engineer in the room? Nope. Frank's not here yet. If you would like, I'd open up to questions from the board, and when Mr. Tavani shows up, I could interrupt and have him talk about.
That probably makes sense, and we can get going.
Yep.
Are you okay?
So, Vasca, if you could hang on, the members of the Planning Commission may have questions. Thank you.
So we wanted to group our questions in categories to make it easier for everybody to understand what we're coming from and have you answer them. So if you have your sound expert on now, we could ask our questions regarding sound.
That's perfectly fine, sure.
Okay.
So, Ben, there are going to be questions for you coming up.
Ben, could you hear that? Yes.
I have some questions also.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? My friend with sound. Yes?
Ben, can you hear the planning commission question?
It's choppy. Try again.
Okay. I just want to make sure that you can hear me before I ask my questions.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the sound survey, as I understand it, is A-weighted, correct?
The sound survey is, what was the last part of it?
A-weighted.
Oh, A-weighted, correct, yes.
So one of the concerns I have as a physician and as a member of the community is that the typical electronic data hum that is associated with data centers nationally is not in the A-weighted range. I'm wondering what you can tell us about mitigation of that type of sound in the development plans.
So I got most of that, but you're asking about the discrepancy or what the difference is between the A weighting and the C weighting.
Yes.
So the good news is that both weightings cover the range of audible spectrum. So they don't cover, one doesn't cover one better or worse than the other. Think of it as that all sound has a pressure displacement, and that's just natural. A sound level meter is high tech and is able to measure exactly what that displacement is. Our ears, on the other hand, are not sensitive machines like a sound level meter. And so what the A-weighted correction is it softens some of that actual pressure on the low end as well as on the high end to better represent how we as humans hear. And so 99.9% of the environmental noise codes and products that we work on involve the A-weighted network. And that just makes sense because we're really focusing on how sound is perceived by people. The C weighting, on the other hand, is another correction curve for that actual pressure displacement, but it is less correcting in the low end and the high end. And so when you see the difference between something, it's the same sound, but if it's measured on the A weight frequency and it's measured on the C weight frequency, the same sound can measure two different things. And what that is because is if there is lower frequency in the source, the C weight will be higher than the A weight. So most sound level meters do have the ability to measure A versus C, but if we were to be looking at a C-weighted focus, we would also want a C-weighted criteria, project goals for it, and that's not something that we typically see. Not that it's not that there couldn't be some sort of a benefit there, but it's not widespreadly used. It's not a common practice. So the low frequencies that are produced by any equipment, including that of a data center, are more than acceptably captured within the A-weighted frequency band. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Maybe I can rephrase from a layman's perspective. You currently, in your proposal, will meet the local sound thresholds at the perimeter of the data center, correct? Can you assure us that the electronic hum that is problematic for people near data centers will not be perceptible beyond the boundary of the facility? Has that been modeled?
Sure. So all of our analyses are done in the full octave spectrum. We are all limited somewhat to what data manufacturers provide. So for example, when it gets really low, like 32 hertz, manufacturers typically don't provide data, but that's also balanced because that's also not a frequency where we hear well. So the local noise ordinance is provided only with an overall limit in mind. But that being the case, I understand your concern about there being a hum or tone present offsite, and what we're trying to do in our mitigation package would be to make sure that there isn't some outlier. I could understand where you would be concerned about complying with the overall limit, but be left with a tone or something that could be problematic, and that wouldn't be our intent. I know with working with substations, electrical equipment does have a signature hum. That's usually very low in level, that it's not a problem at offsite vantage points. But again, we would be working in the project to help smooth those things out if they should show themselves.
Can I, it's a good question, it's a good line of questions, but if I understand the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, the question is, will there be zero perception in the C-weighted measurements at the property line?
That is correct.
And the township's ordinance doesn't require zero at the A-weighted, correct, at the property line?
So I understand that.
But
This is a question for the health and safety of the community.
Understood. But what
May I finish, please?
But
Sometimes sometimes an ordinance sets a minimum threshold, but as I said, for the health of the community, there are questions that will come up that may go beyond.
No,
those
I agree.
ordinances.
But my
Thank
point is, are you, if I can ask my expert, are you aware of any municipal standard or state standard which would require the measurement to be zero at a property line? Because that's what the question is. Not whether or not there's a reasonable standard that could be applied, but zero is the standard that you're being asked.
That is the standard I'm asking about, yes.
Yes, and I'm asking the witness, are you aware of any A-weighted or C-weighted regulation or ordinance which would require a measurement of zero, which is what the question is?
No,
And in fact, I asked you to look at the Montgomery County's proposed recommendation for ordinances as it relates to noise in anticipation of our meeting tonight, correct?
Correct.
And they comment on the C-weighted measurements, correct?
Yes.
Do they suggest that zero at a property line is a reasonable or appropriate standard to be held to?
No, I believe they had, the relationship they had was that the C weight was 10 to 15 dB higher than the 8-way counterpart.
Are you aware of any municipal ordinance which regulates a use based on C-weighted measurements?
The only one that comes to mind would be New York City, and they use DBC for nightclub regulation to help with their live music control.
So you're being asked,
Other municip-
you're being asked about a zero standard when there is no municipal regulation, to your knowledge, except for New York City, that even regulates C-weighted sound. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I will echo again for the record that the CDC is a reliable source of standards, so the question does stand. Thank you. My last question.
I don't disagree. For the record, I don't object to the question. I don't object to the concept or the topic. A zero, if you can point to us a standard
I don't
adopted by the CDC requiring a use to be zero, I would like to see it.
I'd like to move on to my last question about sound. You mentioned that there are 3 phases of study, one in modeling, one in the process of build, and the second is post-construction. What is the mitigation strategy if the sound study fails post-production? And that speaks to both sound and vibration.
Great question.
The reason for the failure is we would want to design the project such that there weren't any surprises, but I have been involved in projects where we weren't able to get the model we wanted, and so we had to deal with an off-the-shelf one, and perhaps that was a little bit higher in level than anticipated. So options might include equipment replacement. It could include administrative controls, such as setting back performance during the nighttime hours. It could involve introducing supplemental mitigation on it. If we had built a 10-foot barrier and that was inefficient, then we would have to put a 12-foot or some form of extension. There are many options available, but as a project, none of them would want to be addressed at that time. We want to address it during the design phase.
Great. I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have a.
I
I'm
appreciate
just
your
going to
question.
ask people to refrain from cheering and clapping. We really need to move this along. We have a tight deadline. Thank you.
Yeah, and a follow-up question with the sound test. There are 3 tests, but after that, would your client be committed to do one every year,
Yes.
to follow up every year with the sound test?
Yes, your township's ordinance has a protocol in place to enforce all of your noise ordinances. And yes, we would accept a condition to test on an annual basis. My guess is that you will test more frequently than that, but we're happy to accept that as a condition.
Thank you.
Ed, and your expert, I just have a few questions. Bruce actually stole my question about what you do if we find out that you're in violation of the ordinances, and understand that. One of the questions I have is, do you have any information on existing data center noise levels? Have there been studies conducted at existing facilities? Doesn't necessarily mean here, but maybe around the country?
Sure.
That you could provide that information to support some of your information? Because it sounds like you did the study based on the equipment and what it generates, but it doesn't take into account environmental factors, what kind of hardscape you're going to have, because noise travels further on a hardscape than it does on a meadow. So I'd like to see that information provided to the township now. Whether it's in the conditional use, definitely needs to be provided during land development. But
Sure. So 2 comments. One is that much of what you will find available in the public domain about data centers is often based on data centers which are designed 20 years ago, built 10 years ago, and reflect designs and protocols that aren't in place today. And so, although they're out there, and I think they're helpful because they help us address those concerns and issues to be aware of them, I don't know necessarily that those studies about data centers designed 20 years ago, built 10 years ago, are helpful for us today, but I don't know that they control. But if I could ask Mr. Mueller a question. So, very good question about sound and the effect that the environment has on how sound travels. Did you take into account some basic concepts about the site in terms of topography, slope, the fact that the site is currently undeveloped, it's not in an urban environment? Did you take the normal parameters that you would typically take into account in preparing your sound study and modeling?
Yes, and that's exactly parts of the model that are presented and why that's very useful. So we're looking at the specific geometry of the site. We're looking at where there is pavement versus where there is not. We're looking at how different buildings and equipment screen and interact with it. So all those factors are specifically pertain to this application. We have worked on thousands of projects, some data centers, some not data centers, but they're all different. And what would be unique to this project is the equipment configuration, the quantity, the amounts, the things like that. So I don't know that looking at a timeline or a resume of successful projects will have any bearing on this one. I do know that this project is not, other than the fact that we're talking about chillers and generators, this is exactly what we do for every project, regardless of the type, whether it's a doggy daycare or it's a warehouse or it's a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, and that this approach and the professional tools and analyses that we're doing are applicable to all of those. So the idea would be to understand how your sound is, what is producing it, how it travels off site, and then if we exceed our criteria, what do we need to introduce in order to mitigate that? And here in this project stage right now, we've put in some parapets, we put in some barriers around the generator, and we've selected quieter equipment. So those evolutions will continue to happen as the design moves along, and we're ensured that the project that will be fully permitted will comply with all applicable local and state ordinances.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question, and it goes back to the post-development study. How are you going to do that study? Meaning, you're going to go out and take noise readings at the property line, which is required. How are you going to factor out Route 422's traffic, which is a major noise source in the area? The power plant, the existing power plant, does have a noticeable hum because of its fans and motors over there. I just don't know how you're going to be able to, are you going to do noise readings at all at this site the way they are today to use that as a baseline? Because otherwise you're going to be penalized by that traffic and that noise from the power plant, and you can't really, after that, what is that, the cat's out of the bag at that point, and you can't discern what's making a noise, and you may get penalized. So what are you going to, how are you going to do that noise study?
Sure, these are things that we deal with on a daily basis in the field, so they're not really that, they're not uncommon at all. We have a couple techniques that we would use. We don't currently have a plan to survey the existing conditions, and while that might provide you with some information for the here and now, that's hard to tell that in 5 years' time whether that would still be applicable once there's other developments in the area and the other things continue to evolve. So what we would traditionally do, we have two options. One is when we go do a property line measurement, we can, if we have the ability to, turn the equipment on and off, then that gives us our baseline and our site sound in two different measurements, and we're able to subtract the two to find out just what our contribution is. And the other one, for example, the substations and the electrical equipment that is on the also on the project site. I'm very familiar with those. We work on those all across the region, and we can't turn those off. So what we do in that respect is we might make a measurement representative at the property line with that equipment, and then we might choose another place that's set back further away from it that doesn't have the influence of the substation.
Ben,
but
let
would
me cut
also
you
still
off.
have the influence.
Let me cut you off. I might have a better answer. We would accept as a condition that our operational sound studies be prepared in consultation with the township's sound expert so that it's accurate. We so that it provides an accurate result, if that helps.
Well, I think it's in your best interest to do it to protect yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not here to advocate for you, but what I'm saying, I do noise studies myself, so I know what the methodologies that you should be using for. I do it for my clients, so I'm just saying we don't know what is out there right now, and I'd like to know what the noise levels are out there, because I don't want someone coming back afterwards and saying, well, we can't. That's noise from Route 422, and our numbers are really high now.
So you want an ambient, an ambient measurement.
I'd recommend that the township require some ambient readings along the property.
I'll talk to my client about that.
Yeah.
It's not an unreasonable request.
Now, you said you could turn off the equipment and to do the noise readings with the equipment turned off. Are you able to actually do that and still operate? I mean,
Well, if we were doing commissioning before the site was live, that might be something to do. I would agree that after there's data in the data center, that it's not advisable to shut it off. But we would then use alternate techniques to take a measurement elsewhere that doesn't have the influence of the data center, but that is also still representative of the neighborhood and the distant traffic and things like that. It's usually not that difficult to find a comparable spot to do that. It's an assumption, but it's readily done, and there's not, as long as you do it with a conservative element.
well, I think if you do
There's no problem.
the ambient readings, it's a moot point. Then you won't have to turn off the equipment, unless you're trying to figure out which ones are causing the issues or something like that.
Yeah,
Or
it can be a
issues,
it can resolve, it can answer some questions such as yours about what the existing ambient currently sounds like. So I don't disagree there. But just know that if we went out tomorrow, that data point would be representative of April of 2026, and that by the time the facility is commissioned, let's say several years later, there might be other developments or changes that have naturally occurred. So
We'll work on that. We got
it doesn't hurt to have a point like a data point, what you're saying, but also there's only a window of time where that can be as useful as, relied upon for what you're thinking of.
Yeah,
but that is one option available.
Let me interrupt you.
to help with.
When we do traffic studies, we make sure that either the township's traffic engineer or PennDOT approves when and where we're going to do it. So in terms of taking ambient testing, we would consult with the township as to when and where to get a fair background.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Ed, questions about those acoustic screens that are going to surround the rooftop chillers and the backup generators. What's the lifespan on them, and do they get replaced every so often, or are they subject to a yearly checkup?
They typically have a lifespan that's comparable to the other building materials that are used. They can be anywhere from aluminum or a steel metal panel construction. For the ones around the generators, it could be precast concrete or brick wall, or being seated out of pressure-treated wood. So there's a variety of materials that will act as an acoustical screen. Obviously, the wood has a shorter lifespan than concrete, but whatever the material is, it goes hand in hand with the lifespan of a lot of the other elements of the facility. So it's not like the sound barrier needs more TLC than other elements of the project.
But I think it's a good question. If you were to recommend a condition about annual testing and there were deviations from prior tests, I think we would then evaluate those attenuation measures and make sure they're improved and updated.
that would certainly be one of the elements to explore. But I've rarely found that there would be, if we didn't find that on day one, I don't know that a year later something might shed its light. Unless there was some sort of major issue, wall got knocked down or something like that, that it was not performing the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Campbell, I think we're good with sound. If you want to turn it over to your traffic expert.
Sure. Mr. Devani, could you, and I know we're under a tight schedule, so this will be what I hope is the fastest traffic presentation I've ever given. To my left is Frank Devani. Mr. Devani.
No pressure, huh?
Yeah, no pressure. Mr. Devani, what do you do for a living?
I'm a traffic engineer.
And as part of this project, we asked you to perform. What did we ask you to do? You tell us in your words.
To investigate the traffic impacts associated with the proposed.
You need to
data
speak into the
center.
mic.
Yep.
To investigate the traffic impacts associated with the proposed data center.
There was previously a warehouse proposed for this site, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So at a high level, the traffic impact that this proposed development would have compared to a warehouse development is what?
Less.
By a measure or a factor of what?
I don't have that number at my fingertips, but I can say that there aren't many other land uses that would generate less traffic than a data center, save for perhaps a cemetery.
Right. And did you prepare a traffic study and submit it to the township?
Yes.
Can you, very briefly, summarize what you conclude based on the traffic study you did?
The site will generate approximately 140 directional peak hour trips at its maximum. So in the morning, when you have shift employees arriving, I believe the exact number is 137 trips inbound in the morning, a lesser amount outbound. And then in the afternoon, it was like 110, 120. So the peak directional traffic is going to be about 2 trips per minute, arriving from all different directions. And of course, the employees of the data center, some will be local or local-ish, and will, perhaps use Lewis Road or Ridge Pike, Rupert Road to get to and from the site. Some, of course, will live along the Route 422 corridor and will use the nearby interchange to travel to and from the site. But for the most part, there will be some distribution of traffic. The site generally benefits from the fact that its closest significant trip-generating neighbor is a retail site, the outlets. So during the weekday AM peak hour, which is one of the 2 commuter peak hours most often studied by traffic engineers, there's already a relatively low level of traffic in the immediate vicinity because a lot of those stores aren't even open yet. And of course, on Saturday, the data center is operating on a skeleton shift at that time, and that's when the outlets are at their maximum. So in some ways, it's actually a very complementary use for the study area. But to answer your question, the impact of the site does not trigger any standards under PennDOT, which in simple terms says if you have an increase in overall intersection delay between a future projected condition with and without site traffic that's greater than 10 seconds, then you have to consider something to offset the impact of the development. And we don't pass that threshold. Most of the overall delay impact is on the order of 1 or 2 seconds. I think the closest we get is 7 or 8 seconds at one location during one peak hour. But generally speaking, the impact is minimal. The proposed access is along Lightcap Road at an already signalized intersection, as you can see on the screen. On the upper center portion, we'll just basically be creating a 4th leg to that existing 3-leg signalized intersection. So that's a very efficient way to access the site.
You submitted a report. The township's traffic engineer prepared a review and submitted that. Have you reviewed that review?
Yes, so technically, there was a report submitted in October, and we got our first review letter, and then I revised my report in late December, submitted that. That was reviewed again, and the latest letter, I believe, is dated February 12th.
Are there any comments from the township's traffic expert that we cannot address or incorporate when we get to land development?
No. They can all be addressed.
I'm not going to go any further. Is there adequate parking on site to handle the anticipated trips in and out?
Yes, including any potential overlap of arriving and departing employees during shift changes.
We're under a time constraint. I don't want to go, I wouldn't go into the, at a hearing we might go into more detail, but as an overview, I think traffic is not the biggest issue that we're here to talk about tonight. Do you have any questions for Mr. Devani? And then
One question for the traffic expert.
Have you had any preliminary discussions with PennDOT about the relocation of Saratoga Road?
I have not.
Has your team at all?
yes,
It is,
from an
it looks
engineering
like it's an integral part of your plan. I'd like to see if you've made a scoping application or anything like that. I don't know if it,
yeah, there have been some preliminary discussions. We have not had a scoping meeting. What I anticipate is when we come in for, assuming we're approved for conditional use, the next step, right, would be to come in for land development, and we will have those scoping meetings in more detail. Well, we'll have a scoping meeting with PennDOT about a number of things, but we'll specifically talk about that road.
right, I would agree with you. That's something that normally would be handled during land development. But this is, a portion of your plan. The road goes onto your site,
Yes.
or goes through your site, and, whether you can actually relocate that road and still build your site with this plan, I think is important to know that. So
It is, and we accept as a condition that we have to do two things. We have to satisfy PennDOT to the extent they have control over that, and we have to work with the township for a road vacation agreement, and then dedicate the new road back to the township.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have no more questions for Mr. Tavani. If there are more questions from the board, or the planning commission for Mr. Tavani, or for our site, for our project manager, or for our emissions expert, I'd be happy to entertain those questions.
I have one on the noise.
Sure.
God forbid there's a catastrophe, say at the power plant. You're now firing up 288 generators on this site. What's that noise decibel-wise coming out of that complex, number one? And just say that power plant can't get up and running for an indefinite period of time. Is there an on-site storage of diesel fuel underground? Are they bringing tankers in? How are these generators going to be fueled?
Yep, great question. So I don't believe that Ben Mueller modeled all generators at one time, because the ordinance doesn't require it, right? The ordinance exempts the operation, the sound regulations as it relates to the generators for emergency situations. Each one of the generators will have a tank associated with it with diesel. They're self-contained. It's not going to have one giant tank somewhere. If there's 35 generators per building, each generator has their own tank associated with it, and that tank will carry enough fuel to operate that generator typically for 48 hours.
Yeah, what if it's I understand that. What if it's a prolonged period of time? Is the fuel stored on site? Is it an underground tank?
No, there's no underground tank. Additional fuel would have to be brought in.
I have a general question about design. Can you comment on why diesel is being used versus natural gas from a health perspective and emission perspective? Thank you.
Yeah. So there's two things. There are, natural gas pipelines on site. And so it prompts the question as to why aren't we using natural gas. But the reality is that I had the same question. Why aren't we tapping into it? The design of the pipeline is not such that something that you can pull off it. It's not like the pipeline that would go through any of our neighborhoods or any through our communities that we have access to. So one, that presents one of the problems, that it's a completely different design. And two, I think the industry standards now are using diesel primarily because they're used relatively infrequently. This project does not propose a self-generation of ongoing power, right? There are other projects that I've seen where they do that, and they do rely on natural gas for that purpose. But because it's an intermittent source of backup power, I think diesel is the most efficient and appropriate for the site.
So, again, I'm not an expert. I'd like to ask our emissions expert that at least nationally it appears that about a quarter of data centers are currently using natural gas. And I think the reason is the emissions technically are healthier than the emissions from diesel, particularly when it comes to adults and children with asthma. So I'm curious if our expert is still on and could comment on the choice.
Bosco, are you still there?
I'm still having difficulty hearing. I apologize if someone could repeat the question. I got part of it.
Absolutely. I'm curious about the choice of diesel versus natural gas based on what appears to be nationally a trend towards natural gas. And the second is that emissions from natural gas may have less adverse health impacts than from diesel. I was wondering what your expert opinion is on that matter. Thanks.
Sure, yeah, and I will say, not being a health professional, I really can't speak to health impacts. I will say, even though there is a growing trend perhaps on the use of natural gas, the majority, I would say 90+% of the many generators and data centers that I've permitted still rely on diesel. I think there is a reliability issue involved, and the ability to store the fuel on site that would allow you to run that you may not get with natural gas if there's an impact to the natural gas supply. But in terms of emissions, it really ultimately comes down to the fact that these run so infrequently that emissions really overall are not significant when you look in terms of actual emissions. They may be permitted to emit higher emissions because the way the permitting process works, you have to permit the worst case. But in reality, outages are infrequent and they never last as long as the worst case. So actual operations tend to be very limited for maintenance and testing. So that advantage that you may gain from switching from diesel fuel to natural gas is not as significant when you take into account the actual runtime for these generators. And I would imagine, again, this not being my field, I think there are issues with access to gas and sufficient gas to power some of these generators that you don't have with diesel fuel, because obviously it does not require a pipeline. It can be delivered to a data center. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll cluster some questions regarding the water consumption.
Sure.
We starting with water?
Sure.
Ed, thank you. So you stated at the beginning that this facilities will use a closed loop system?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when this build out, if it's completely built out, Laurel will use about 1.5 to 1.75 million gallons a day.
I'm sorry, what?
When the project's completely built out, how many gallons per day will that use?
No, nothing, not even close to that.
Okay.
You're talking about per year or per day?
Per day.
Per day? I think the estimate's about 100,000 gallons a day.
100,000 gallons a day?
I'll confirm that, but I think that's a conservative estimate. It's a closed loop system.
Okay.
So it's like your car radiator. is filled with water. It's also, there's a chemical called glycol,
Glycol
which is
in
part
there?
of it. Yep.
Okay.
And it occasionally needs to be topped off, right? Just like a car radiator occasionally needs additional coolant in it. And once that system is filled, it's sealed. It is not an evaporative system. When you read about the systems that use millions of gallons of water a day, they're using a completely different system. Now, there's a trade-off, right? Because those systems probably use less electricity, and a data center operating on a closed-loop system uses more electricity, but it's more efficient in terms of its use of water. My client has agreed that this will be a closed-loop system.
And about 40% of the electrical use is used for cooling.
So that number continues to drop as the cooling components become more efficient. I haven't seen 40%, but it's not an insignificant number. I think it's less than 30, but it's a significant number.
Now, with the closed-loop system, you have to flush it, you have to do blowback to flush the system, is that correct?
Yes.
How often is that done?
Can you comment on that?
No, the data, you'll do that in the conditional use.
Yeah. We have a different expert lined up to talk about that. It is certainly, well, if you give me a minute, I'll get you an answer, but I don't have that answer at my fingertips.
Okay, and then is that discharged into the public sewer system, or is that, do you remove that separately?
So my belief, I understand the township to have well, township doesn't run its sewer system anymore, but when it did, you would need an industrial discharge permit, which requires you to manage your effluent into the system. The same thing would apply here. So yes, that goes into the public sewer system, but it is not, it is treated before it's discharged.
And it goes in at a higher temperature?
Yeah, I think the higher temperature goes in, that's more common a problem with an open loop system, rather than a closed loop system.
Now, right now, before we came here, if we watch the news, we are in a drought right now.
Yep.
Do you have certain protocols if there is a drought in the area about your water usage during those times?
Sure. So that's exactly one of the advantages of using a closed-loop system. There's really three systems, right? There's an open system, which uses the extraordinary amount of water. There's called an adiabatic system, which is a hybrid, which can operate completely as a closed-loop system. Probably uses next to no water for 5 months of the year, and then in the balance of the years, it uses more water on hot days, right? But it can shut down completely during droughts or events. The operation of this data center, because it's a closed-loop system, will not be impacted by a drought or water interruption. If need be, you could literally truck water in if there was a disruption in water service or a drought.
Would you keep extra water on site?
I don't recall if we have a water tower on site.
We do not.
We don't have
No.
we're not programmed to keep extra water on site. I don't believe there's a need for it, given the closed loop system. An open loop system, you'd need a significant water tower, or you'd need a well, or you need a river draw. But we're not proposing those things. We're a closed loop system. And I think your ordinance actually talks to, if you're not going to be on, if you're going to do something other than public water, you'd have to do a water feasibility study. We're not proposing a water feasibility study. We're not going to be drawing water out of the aquifer. We're not drawing it out of the river. We're using public water to fill the system. And in the event of a drought, if there was an issue with that, we would source the water in separately.
Thank you, Ed.
Ed, I have a question about the water system. Does the water department have to build out their infrastructure to bring it onto site? And if so, is that being paid for by your company, or is that going to be passed on to the taxpayers from the water department itself?
Great question. Any improvement to the water system that's required to serve this project will be paid by my client.
So perhaps a follow-up to that. I'm looking at the letter from PAWC from 2024 that appears to address substantial infrastructure improvements required, and it seems to be referring to an open system. I'm wondering if either we could get a revision of this letter from PAWC that suggests what infrastructure is actually required to support your current proposal.
Yeah, my recollection of that letter is that it presumes that we would be using 750,000 gallons of water per day.
Right.
And we're not. It's a closed-loop system. And so it's a good point. I don't know that all of the improvements identified in that letter are going to be required, given the fact that we're going to be using substantially less water. AJ, can you comment on that?
Yeah, maybe I'll give you some background on the process. What happens is when you right now they kind of said, yes, we have water. You're going to have to pay for all the upgrades, infrastructure, all that. When you get your system set up, when you choose your system, for example, then they provide you with essentially a industrial user form. And in that, you have to list your daily, monthly, quarterly, annual, average, minimum, maximum daily flow. You have to provide your requisite operating pressures. And then you provide them all your data, and then PAW does an internal analysis, and they have to show that they can't, so they would recommend all upgrades, and even if it's to the treatment plant, pipelines, whatever, and the thing that they're held to by their tariff is to maintain the current operating pressure and demand and production for the ratepayers above any industrial user. And then on a side note, if there is a drought, a situation of a drought, Pennsylvania American Water, under their tariff, is required to essentially turn off all the industrial users and maintain that water for the ratepayers.
I don't know if that answered your question. I think your question was you want an update from the water company regarding the improvements we need to make?
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. I'll endeavor to obtain that.
So as part of the conditional use approval, you need to supply a letter from Aqua about sewer capacity. I know that you had a letter in your submission that was just a letter from a third-party consultant that gave an amount of sewage flows, but there was no documentation to how they were calculated, nor was there a letter from the sewage company saying that they have capacity. Do you know when we'll be expecting that?
I will double check it, but my recollection is that the anticipated sewage discharge is less than what a similar office building would be by many, by a long stretch. Like I don't think you have any capacity problems in the existing sewer system in the town.
They might not be a capacity problem, but it's part of conditional use approval was to have that approval letter from Aqua.
I will double check that. It's a fair point.
Thank you.
I will ask some questions about electric usage and capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So before, when we were speaking about the generators, and you mentioned on-site energy generation, is that something that the applicant considered? Because I know there's a lot of concern about the energy grid and the amount of power that will be used. Did the applicants consider that?
Given the immediate proximity to the power source and given the immediate proximity to the substantial transmission lines, on this site, on-site generation was not, permanent on-site generation was not contemplated.
I have a question about electric. So the capacity from PECO documentation is 750 megawatts of power. Where exactly is that coming from, and how does it relate to a recent proposal for transmission lines going over the Schuylkill River at Frick's Lock? Is that related to this, or is that a separate issue?
It is not unrelated to our project, right? I mean, we're going to be using electricity, and that's an infrastructure proposal that is absolutely, that's the way I would describe it. It's not unrelated to our project.
I'm not aware of this. Are there other transmission lines currently across the Schuylkill River in Montgomery County?
In Montgomery County?
Right there, process.
Or Chester?
Yeah.
In the region?
Yeah, there are. I'm trying to identify where they are. So I know that in Norristown, Barbados Island, right? I think there are other locations as well. I don't think that's extraordinary.
Thank you.
Could you guys show us on that map of the initial layout of your project where that line that's now being currently or going to be moved, where that would come in at?
Where the line across the river will come in?
Yes.
I think that comes to the.
It's off.
Yeah, it's off-site. It comes in, doesn't come into our property.
Okay. It goes to the generation plant?
Yes, to their property.
One additional question about that, at least according to the lay press, which is what I have access to, the cost of that transmission line, the infrastructure, will be passed on to the taxpayer. And I'm wondering why it is not being accommodated by the developer for the data center, since it's solely for the use of the data center.
I don't believe that it's solely for our use. I said it's not unrelated to us, but it's not solely for our use.
So I think it may be helpful to have some form of documentation about the use of that transmission line, where that power is going, what proportion of it is going directly to the data center and or other uses in the township. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, so we have a couple zoning questions. I'll start with one for the switch yard. It's not separated from an existing residential use by a principal building as required by our standard here, but it's my understanding you don't consider it data center equipment?
Yeah, so two things. First of all, it will be owned and operated by a public utility, and when a facility is owned and operated by a public utility, it's treated differently under zoning, number one. And number two, the definition of DCE is an accessory to a data center, which in an unmuffled state generates a noise level of a certain threshold. I don't have the code in front of me, but those facilities will not cross over those thresholds. So it's not DCE because it's owned and operated by a utility. It's not DCE because it doesn't trigger the noise threshold.
I'm sorry, Bill. Ed, I'm going to go back to the power real quick. A few months ago, or maybe a month ago, at the White House, the big AI companies signed a pledge not to pass on increased energy use to the community if a data center is built in there. Does your client adhere to that pledge, not to pass on any extra costs to the community?
Right, it's a great it's a great tagline, it's a great slogan. To the extent, what? Fair enough. Look, do you want to?
Again, please stop. We're not going to get to public comment if we
I'm
have
not
to
a politician,
keep
so
stopping.
I got to be straight with you, right? The reality is that to the extent that there are physical improvements that are required for this property and for this, my client assumes those responsibilities, whether it's electricity utilities or water utilities or any of the improvements that are specifically related to this facility. To the extent there are other facilities that are approved, my client is like every other user and bears their fair share.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
Okay, we'll have some safety issues now.
I'm sorry?
Safety issues?
Yes.
Thanks. So there was correspondence from Matt Markland here in the township, as well as a letter from Labella in January that referenced that the discussion with fire safety and EMS have not yet occurred regarding special conditions, hazardous material, and electrical power and infrastructure needs.
Yeah.
Has that discussion occurred yet?
So we have an emergency management protocol system that, two things. I'm sure you're aware of the county's recent document they put out with guidance on it as well. So we're submitting that EMS plan, and we're going to incorporate some of the elements recently recommended by the county in that. So other than to say that we're confident that the EMS system and the EMS protocol will be satisfactory, you don't have it.
Submitted when?
We originally submitted, I thought, the middle of or end of February. I haven't seen a review.
I haven't seen the document. I don't know if anybody else on commission
I'll follow up on that.
has seen that. Thank you.
Sure.
Ed, I don't know if this is really a safety, but I guess it is. I mean, it falls, if you want to put it in any of the categories. I believe a past planning commission meeting this year, there was a public comment about, and I may be mistaken, but I thought it was a representative of the airport, got up and said that they were opposed to it and they didn't think it was safe. I'm just paraphrasing, but I know that there was a letter in our packet from the FAA that said that it was, that they didn't have any issues with it, but that letter is kind of dated. That was from 2024.
So two things. The ordinance requires a very specific kind of letter to be issued by the FAA, which we got, my client obtained for the warehouse development, and we've submitted for an updated letter on that. In fact, at the earlier meeting I was at, I don't recall anyone speaking on behalf of the airport, but I will say that we've received letters from the FAA approving developments of greater height than we're proposing now, so we don't anticipate that being an issue. It's a fair point. We need to get that updated letter.
Okay. My memory gets fuzzy these days, so I thought I recalled that, but thank you for your answer.
And then we'll just, the rest of the time here, we'll ask you some individual questions that aren't classified into
Sure,
any
I appreciate how
specific
you've
group.
how you've categorized everything. We're happy to answer any other questions you may have.
If I may, I'll just ask one quick one here about the financial impact analysis that was done. And so I understand it correctly, the initial impact for us is around $42 million annually. from what I gather?
Correct.
And that's split between the school district, the township, and the county.
I think the community college is also in there, but yes.
Okay. And the majority of that money would go to the school district.
Yes, so that part of the analysis relates to real estate tax, and obviously our schools are in Pennsylvania are primarily funded by real estate tax, and the real estate tax that they assess is substantially greater than what the municipality or the county assesses. So yes, the biggest benefit goes to the school district.
But at any given time in the future, if data centers are reclassified as a public utility, then that would change their tax burden, correct?
It's a yes. Let me tell you that in many communities, there's been a discussion between developers and the community about what's called the community benefit agreement. And a component of a community benefit agreement could be an agreement to preserve a particular tax structure. And that's really fleshed out in a land development process rather than a conditional use process. But if we were to receive conditional use and proceed to land development, we would accept as a recommendation or a condition that we enter into a CBA, and that CBA could address that issue.
And that would hold the current tax rates in
Yeah.
perpetuity of the project? Did you do a converse fiscal report on what the net profit would be for us, or the revenue for the school district would be if there was the conversion to a public utility?
No, I'm not aware of any data centers being co-opted by a public utility. I haven't heard that concept before, to be honest with you.
Okay. I mean, from my research that I did, it looks like the majority of that reduction could be less than 25% of what's anticipated currently if it was to convert to a public utility under I believe it's called the PERTA tax.
If the state changed the public utility law to allow data centers to be operated as...
If they classified a data center as a public utility, then there would be no burden for real estate tax, and all the revenue would go to the state level, and then they would disperse it amongst the entire state instead of the community where the data center is located.
I agree that if that were to happen, it sounds like your understanding of that law is correct. I haven't heard of that as being I haven't heard of data centers being co-opted as public utilities.
Okay.
That's a new one.
Thank you.
Ed, we talked about, how about the jobs that will be created here? I know during construction there will be a lot of jobs, but when the dust settles, how many employees will be in those buildings?
50 to 60?
Per building?
Yes. Yeah, 50 to 60 over 3 shifts. And there's a primary shift during the day and then secondary shifts. So if you imagine 3 8-hour shifts, you probably, if you're talking 60 would be,
And I know that you mentioned, we talked about safety, but the building would be surrounded by a fence and you would have 24-hour security?
Correct. So the entire campus would be fenced in. There's limited points of access with a security gate at that point of access. The individual buildings, there's security protocols for each of them in terms of access, either via card or some other method, significant camera systems. It's a secure system. It's a secure campus. It's a secure campus.
So, since you opened the box of community benefit, I wanted to ask from your perspective, what are the top 5 benefits to our community from having this data center?
Yeah. So first of all, I appreciate the question. What I spoke about was something very precise, a CBA, which is only limited, which has some legal limitations to it, right? So my client's willingness to enter into a CBA is first of all limited to those components which are lawful, right? The primary benefit is economic. It's outlined in my client's economic report. That's the primary benefit. $40 million in revenue, primarily going to the school district, more than half.
Beyond economic, are there other proposed benefits?
Jobs, use of the site with substantially less traffic impact. I mean, those are three.
And another question I have, I think is curious, is, and I know the community's interested in it, there seems to be a lot of interest in this area. There's one next door in East Vincent, there's us, there might be one up in New Hanover. Why this area?
Yeah, so I think if you look in the media, there's references to many data centers being proposed in Pennsylvania, elsewhere as well, but lots in Pennsylvania. First of all, Pennsylvania, I believe, is the third largest producer of power in the state. Pennsylvania is an exporter of power and energy, so energy's here. It's on the eastern seaboard in between DC and Boston, and so to the extent that these data centers wind up being interconnected with places of industry and economic activity that require access, this is a good location for that. Those are the two reasons that I think that, in general, the region has seen an interest in data centers. Regionally.
I know I mentioned before about a decommissioning bond or decommissioning safeguards for data centers, and it seems like there are ordinances now in place in different counties in Pennsylvania. Is that something your client would be amenable to partaking in?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
Decommission safeguard or reclamation bond.
We're looking at it. I can't commit to it. There are a handful of situations and conditions where I've seen it. I've seen them where they're very reasonable, and I've also seen them proposed that are not reasonable. So
what would be reasonable in your estimation?
Well, reasonable would be a plan to convert the buildings, right? You know, there are buildings that could be operated as warehouses, right? So would you talk about a plan to, if it's no longer operated as a data center, to repurpose those buildings as something else? Posting bonds indefinitely and in perpetuity to knock them down and remove them, I don't think that's a reasonable requirement. So I've seen reasonable proposals, and I've seen unreasonable proposals.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up for public comment. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, this is limited to Limerick residents or taxpayers only. You will have 2 minutes, and the microphone is right in the center where some people are pointing, and there's a sign-up sheet. And our fire marshal is stepping down, so please line up. And again, we ask you, please don't be cumulative. There are so many, and we really want to hear your voices. The Planning Commission wants to hear your voices, but not the same comment. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Planning Committee. Great questions. Really like that. Wanted to applaud. Sorry, I was one of those applauders. So, I gotta say, I'm really angry. Okay. I don't like the feeling I'm getting from you. Like when you're talking about water in the beginning, and you would say, "Oh, it's a fraction of that." A fraction of that. Well, a fraction could be 9/10, could be 1/10. You know, what is that? So it really didn't answer any question there. And then another thing, the vibration meeting the standards that's being asked, and it's just sort of like, yeah, it is, but how? Like, what are some of the testing you've done for that? And if the township is asking for more testing around it, like this guy was asking, which great question, you should be doing it. I mean, I realize you're at the point where, where you're only going to do what you have to do, but if you really want to get this project and have the people like not go insane, you're going to have to do better than that. I didn't like your aggressive take on the questioner back here. I don't think that was a smart thing to do. You interrupted him, and so I don't trust you at this point. Not that it matters that I do or not, but and like, would any of you put this in your backyard? Yeah. And to talk about 14 seconds. What do I want to say? All right. How about? Well, I think you need to plan for the unexpected, because there's so much change happening, and climate change is happening. You may not agree with that, but it is, and we got to do something about that.
That's time.
I'm off. Thank you.
That's time.
I've lived in Limerick for 43 years. Seen a lot of changes.
Sorry, sir, we can't hear you.
I've lived in Limerick for 43 years and seen a lot of changes over that time period. You're talking about doing the data center. How long is this going to take as a project? Got an answer? I didn't think so. And when it runs, let's say, past your deadline, is there going to be any penalties for not having it completed by then? I didn't think so. So, you want to change the roads. How long is that going to take you to change the roads back there? Oh, wait a minute. 422 has been under construction for the last 5 years. I don't see it happening. Until you can answer some of the simple questions, I don't think it's even possible to consider approving it. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I don't want to trespass anybody's time, but I'm not answering questions because I thought I was directed not to, and that the community should just be providing
You can
comments.
answer questions. It goes into their 2 minutes.
Fine, so... It's fine. Sure, so if your question is how long the project will take, I mean, I expect our conditional use hearings to go into the summer and then some, and then if we're approved, that our land development application will take another year, and I expect construction to begin thereafter. The first phases of those would probably be started and completed within a year after that, and the total project would probably be 2 years after that. So you're talking about 5 years.
So you're telling me on your rendering, you represent my house right across from your substation, and I'm supposed to put up with this for over 2 years? 5 years?
No, the first 2 years of that is going to be the approval process. But yeah, the construction in phases will probably take 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so
Time's
you're
up.
looking at 5.
Happy to answer your questions.
My name's Joe. I've lived in the township now for about 35 years. And a couple of concerns. I thought you've answered the questions on the water to my satisfaction, and wastewater to my satisfaction. May not like the answers, but it was satisfactory. I did not like your answer on the utilities. It seemed like we just kind of glossed over it, and we really didn't talk about what the impact on the ratepayers is going to be in this area. It's somewhat of a state issue of a regional issue anyway, because of PECO being a regional power company. But you really kind of dodged that question completely. And I've seen some data that suggests that those rates could be increased by as much as 250% in certain areas that have data centers. Could you comment on that at all?
So if your comment, the increase in 250%, I think you're referring to Georgia, right, which had the lowest?
Virginia.
Okay, well, in a handful of states that have seen those increases, they were also the lowest anywhere in the country, and development did result in an increase in rates. The reality is that our electrical rates are impacted by a whole slew of events, of elements, right? You know, just look around the world. Our electrical utility rates are going to be impacted by a whole slew of things. Whether a data center gets built here or a data center gets built somewhere else, if that has an impact on rates, it's going to have an impact on rates everywhere.
I do have one additional question, because you've answered that one sufficiently at this point. There seems to be a lack of a regional plan on this, in the sense that regional plan being there's 3 data centers that are going up in this area. All those numbers you've talked about, statistics you've talked about, relate to this data center. What happens when we put all 3 data centers into place to those same things?
Yep. Sure, I'm happy to answer. Okay.
Time's up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure, we think, and we're confident that
No,
our...
it's the next speaker's turn.
You keep talking about the owner. Who is the owner? Why are we not being told who this person is? And who's going to own this property once it's built?
The owners are investors, and they...
And who are they? They're impacting our lives. We need to know who these people are that want to impact our lives negatively. You want to raise our electric, you want to destroy our water, our home values will be worth nothing. We have been sitting here with a nuclear power plant. We've paid enough dues. We do not need any of these data centers at all.
Thank you.
And as for the sound, go to Vineland, New Jersey. You can hear the sound, and guess what they're saying? It doesn't happen. Yes, it does.
Yeah, I was in Vineland last week.
Oh, good. Did you hear it? And did you
No.
sit there all night?
Have you been to Vineland?
I have been to Vineland.
Okay, and you heard what they
Yes.
put on the video? All right, you're the first person I've been.
Really? Come on.
No, I haven't heard it.
Good. I'll bring it to you the next meeting.
We
and I'll
will
show
stop
you.
the meeting. Order.
You're not being honest. At least if you want to do something, be honest
Data
with
center
us.
isn't even running
Dodging things. You haven't talked about home values. You haven't talked about water. You're wanting us to bear the electricity, which you've honestly said, which is pathetic that you're even thinking that we should bear that brunt. We don't want the data center, so why should we bear anything? We do not want these here.
I understand. Thank you.
But then cancel your proposal, because we don't want them. Not any of them. So back off.
I'm going to bring the mic down here. No, I'm fine. Yep.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay.
So Colleen Zazowski, I'm a Limerick Township resident. I have a husband on the Planning Commission who asked you some serious questions earlier. I do want to say that I have a little bit of deja vu here. Some of you may remember me from my time on the school board. What we have learned in the past few years, especially during COVID, have we asked ourselves those questions at all? We were in that together. And I ask it again because I feel like we're going down that same road. There are some things that we can control, and there are some things that we cannot control. One of those things is the likelihood of these data centers coming here. And we may not, I'm not finished, and I still have time. We may not want the data centers here. There's probably nobody here that'll say that they want it here. But they're likely coming. So what should we do? We should change the narrative. We should change the conversation. We should be focusing on the questions that the Planning Commission was working so hard to get the answers to tonight. I call them the 3 Ps. I call them the protection, conserving our resources, our water, our electricity. I mean, all of those, any kind of, protection of the utilities, of our resources, that is something that needs to happen. We should not be incurring higher costs due to the changes that this data center or data centers are making. I agree with you completely on that. Preparedness. There should be an emergency preparedness plan in writing, in effect, when this piece goes into play, because we have to live here. We want to make sure that it's safe. And what else? What else do we need here? The pollution, the environmental pollution, the waste, the water, the air, the noise, all of that. The 3 Ps, the pollution, the protection of our resources, and emergency preparedness. That's where we need to turn our attention and focus, because they're coming. So make our township officials be accountable to us for
Time's
those
up,
things.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Timothy Good. I live on Chapel Road, just at the edge of the borough. Regarding the sound, is the sound report available on the township website, the sound analysis that they performed? I would also say that I don't think one sample day is sufficient. Sound travels differently throughout the year. I think you need to do a full year's analysis, is that this thing's supposed to be running 24/7. In the wintertime, sound travels farther, so it's going to be heard further away. In the summertime, the hot weather, sound travels faster. But you need a full data set, not just one point, to verify what the impact is going to be for this. Thank you.
Yep.
Out of respect for my time, if you could answer my questions in 5 seconds or less, I'd appreciate it. How often do they test the generators?
I had that. Typically once a quarter.
Okay. And how long do they run for?
4 to 6 hours.
What is the proposed decibel level of the data center?
The standard of the ordinance is 57 and 50 or 57 and 62, but it's within the ordinance requirements.
Thank you. So I'm just up here to say that as you guys are here, your job is to overpromise and you will underdeliver because that's what all project people that run projects do. I've worked with many different construction companies and refrigeration companies and lots of companies. And they always say what they're going to do, and they never do exactly what they say. The quality is never what they promise. And I'm fairly certain that all the stats and all the figures that you have shared are below the bare minimum or the bare minimum of what we would feel as an impact in our community. And I would just like everyone here to think really hard about if that's the bare minimum, what would the maximum be? That's all I have. Thank you.
So I just wanted to highlight some discrepancies that I heard tonight. So one thing that I thought that I heard right at the beginning of the meeting that really wasn't touched on is you said piece of the plot is not zoned for data centers. But you're saying just because a building's not on that plot that it doesn't matter. That just doesn't make sense to me. The entire plot of land is the data center. So I don't understand why we're going to, that's getting into the...
Understood.
Sir, you've had 2 hours to talk. Please let me have my 2
Okay, I thought you wanted me to answer a question.
Nope,
I apologize.
I'm just highlighting things. I don't need any other input.
Okay.
Water usage. Beginning of the meeting, you said 40,000 gallons a day. Towards the end of the meeting, you said 100,000 gallons a day. That's a quick 150% increase. What's it going to be at the next meeting when we talk about water usage? Another thing I want to highlight is all of these, and it's pretty clear, all of these experts, they all have incentive to side with the data centers. They all mentioned how they have a large client base of data centers. So they're not going to be pushing for extra, anything extra to do, right? So when your sound engineer or your sound person talked about no vibration analysis, I have to fight back against that. We need to do the vibration analysis. There's a pipeline underneath your facility. There's a pipeline you're moving around your facility. There's a nuclear power plant right next to it. Why we would not do a vibration analysis where there's a nuclear power plant is absurd to me. I'm just going to highlight again. I know it's been said a couple times. It started with the very first question our commission asked, the antagonistic nature of not answering their questions and just trying to focus on different things or finding ways to not answer. Not going to go well for you overall throughout these meetings. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about with my last 10 seconds is you keep talking about the usage of the data center during emergencies. Why would the data center ever need to run during an emergency? Why is there an emergency where the data center needs to be running?
Hello, Josh Mangle, lived in the township now for 20 years. I just also have some discrepancies. First off, the study I looked at is from data centers built in 24 and newer in Pennsylvania. And just some, why do we want to see 80-foot buildings in the township? We're supposed to be a rural community. You were elected to protect the community, not allow this. Number two, in terms of cost, from PJM, which manages plants all over the East Coast, said in 2025, 2026 alone, an average cost increase of 173%, which averages $37 per household in a month at a low rate. While boasting a tax relief, there have been other shortfalls and costs passed on to the consumer, which you admitted on the back end of your time. As far as the sound goes, I was a science major in school. I don't know of any law of science that stops sound at a barrier because you say it's a property. It's just gonna go, and there's a sound. You're a sound engineer, and you were both involved with the Vineland, New Jersey, and you can check out the news. It's on the 6ABC's website about how they're operating around a 50 decibel, not above, which is what you're proposing, but 50 decibels, and the township says once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and they're still dealing with it.
Data center's not even operating.
So you lied about some stuff, and I just want to urge our township board members to remember, if you vote for this, you're going to tick off everybody here. Instead of the vitriol being focused on them, it could be focused on you, and there's always elections that come up.
Construction equipment behind me.
So how long does it take for one of these data centers to finish their priming state? How many weeks, how many months, how many hours, how many days?
I'm sorry, to finish their what?
Priming, when they put the water in and they turn on all the cooling?
So they're filled in less than a day.
Okay, how long does that humming last for?
How much does that water last? How often does it happen?
No, how long does that sound start for? Because it starts out loud as it goes through, right?
Oh, sound. I thought you were talking.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, you're right. When generators start for a few moments, they're louder, and then they get to
How long does the loudness stand for?
a couple of minutes.
How high is that?
How high is the standard?
How high is the loud sound that comes out of it?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Now, you guys have hired Ostergaard, Benjamin Mueller, Villanova graduate in 1999. How many other projects has he done for your AI data centers?
I think he testified that has done others, but that the
What's
science.
the closest one to Montgomery County that we can go visit and hear?
I don't believe he's done any others in Montgomery
So
County.
no, the closest one to Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, anywhere in PA that we can go visit and listen to, because he's been approved by other boards, correct? To build this, right?
Sure.
Okay, so what's the closest AI data?
I'll get that answer for you. I don't have.
No, I need it now. You already know how many other data centers you've been approved for.
How many other data centers I've been approved for?
Or this company.
This company.
Okay, and then
has-
to finish answering that gentleman's question, so the 3 data centers are up and running. How much percentage is our electricity bill going up?
I answered that question before.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
He ran out of
Okay.
time. They stopped him. Just like the one wife of one of the people sitting up on the stage has already answered that these are going to be approved.
Time's up.
My name is Jack Mellon. I've been a resident and a property owner in Limerick Township for over 60 years. I have a comment. You came here tonight with an incomplete drawing. It kind of shocks me for you're representing a company that's going to spend a lot of money, but you couldn't come here with a drawing that's correct? And then I have a question. I missed the height of the buildings, the highest height.
Zoning permits 120. Buildings are proposed to be 80 to 85.
80 to 85 feet high. Okay. Has your company that you represent built any units that's similar to this?
Members of our team have been involved in projects that have dealt data centers. The owners of this property, this, to my knowledge, is the first data center they're building.
No, that's not my question. My question is, has your company built any that is very similar to what you're proposing?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't really understand the question.
Well, it would be nice if we knew. As residents, we could go and visit the site, and we could get
No, that's a
feeling.
fair question. I can give you other data centers that are similar. I can talk to those experts and provide that information.
Well, that would be nice. Then we could physically go there and listen to what we're going to have to put up with.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
So my name's Robert Cross. I live on Church Road here, so it's pretty close to in between both of these data centers that are being proposed. I'm pretty much smack dab right in the middle of them in a straight line there. So I mean, you guys are talking about decibel levels. You're talking about noise. You're talking about volumes. I said it at the North Coventry meeting. There are a bunch of people here who I know heard me there too. I was in the military. I was deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, all of that. I shot artillery. We're only allowed to use so many artillery rounds and so many charges that we can fire those down because it's separate loading, because the decibel level will destroy our brain, not only that, but stop our heart. But you guys are talking about a constant within tolerances that you're saying, and as the other one said, things don't always go to plan here. So it's going to be louder, and most of the data that they've collected from all these AI data centers are saying that most of them are projected a lot louder than that, and they don't exactly meet these criteria. So if I'm only allowed to fire 2 artillery rounds at a certain decibel level, because of that, you guys are talking about having this at a 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Yeah, how great is that going to be for me? How great is that going to be for my 9-year-old daughter, my 15-year-old son, everybody else who has kids? How great is that going to be for their health, their brain, their hearts? You're talking about $40 million in revenue. Most of it's going to the school district. How many other data centers have done that? Why aren't the people flocking to these areas? Because the schools are so great. I really highly doubt we're going to see $40 million going to the school district, because at that point everyone's going to be driving around in a Maserati and I'm not going to have to pay taxes anymore. Looking forward to that, right? Yeah, okay. Not only that, but you're talking about using PA because it's in between Boston and DC because of the commerce and the things that are going on there. Build them there, not here, dude.
Your
I'm okay
time's
for the
up.
Quiet.
Hi, Corey Bardsley. My understanding is MDC 7 LLC is a Florida limited liability company, intermediate company utilized to keep the actual owners of the data center secret. At what stage of the process will the community actually know who owns/runs the data center? The information I feel is important to the community to compare how other data centers ran by the currently secret owners have affected adjacent communities. While the regulations may have been met for the short term, long-term consequences may take years to identify. Identifying comparable data centers or facilities in the past 5 years ran by a aforementioned company allowed the public to know if there were any violations to local, state, or federal regulations. How do we know if this company is American or foreign owned? And transparency allows the public to make more informed decisions, and the process of hiding the clientele gives more pause to trusting these companies with my community's fiscal and environmental well-being. Personally, I don't see the value to AI as it's being used now. I'm sure eventually it's going to have a lot of value. But presently, I'm seeing it used for war. I'm seeing it used for domestic surveillance. I'm seeing it used as general brain rot, where I see people in my community looking at social media and they see, they can't even discern what's reality anymore. I joined Facebook for the first time, and right off the bat, it was giving me nonsense, and that was just joining it, because I don't normally join it, but I joined it for Marketplace. Basically, our federal government presently is not concerned with protecting people with, at their lowest, and by removing safety nets. So we need to protect our own, and that's why all these people are here to do so.
Time's up.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Jambowski. I wanted to say thank you to the Planning Commission for your thoughtful questions that you posed to the developers that are here. What is happening in Montgomery County and here in Limerick fits a pattern that environmental researchers have named as sacrifice zones, areas around data center clusters where communities bear disproportionate risk from expanded fossil fuel generation, rate hikes, air and noise pollution, while economic benefits flow elsewhere. Regarding electric costs, data centers typically negotiate fixed-price electricity agreements that shield them from long-term cost volatility, leaving residential and low-income ratepayers to bear a large share of infrastructure costs. The independent market monitor for PJM estimated that data centers were responsible for 63% of the price increase in the 2025-2026 auction, totaling $9.3 billion in costs passed on to consumers across the region. We are seeing that in our electric bills in real time. Also, Pennsylvania's 25-year computer data center equipment tax exemption compounds this. The public absorbs the infrastructure burden while the tax benefit flows to the developer. Regarding water, as referenced, the only water served letter on file from PA American Water was dated November 26, 2024. That same letter explicitly states at the end that, quote, "It shall not be considered a reservation or commitment of the capacity needed to service your project." This letter is 2.5 years old. And as stated, we are in a drought again and are predicted to continue to have water scarcity. To me, it sounds like you don't really know how much water you will use, how much water you need, and you do not have a commitment for that water. To the Planning Commission, please do not support to make us a sacrifice zone. Considering the electric costs passed on to residents and water usage that is not even guaranteed and seems to be vague and moving all over the place, along with many other reasons that I cannot fit into these 2 minutes, I strongly request a recommendation to please deny this application. Thank you so much. And thank you. I just want to say thank you to our community for showing up and for being here and for your participation. And I hope to see everybody
Time
back
is
here
up.
across the street on next Tuesday. So.
Hello, my name is Kyle Simpkins. I have lived in Limerick Township for 25 years. Regardless of what the developer says, the bottom line is that there will be constant noise and air pollution. There will be ecological impacts to the surrounding area from the construction. The data center will jack up our utility prices and crash our property values. No one is going to want to invest in this community because of the depressed property values and higher utility prices. What business is left after the data center is constructed will wither and die. The only people that will be left in Limerick are the people that are trapped here because they can't afford to leave. No one in the community wants a data center. The price for 480 new jobs and a little extra revenue for the township is too high. The choice is clear. If the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission truly cares about the community, they should feel obligated to deny the developer a permit for construction and to rezone the land to prevent any company from trying to build a data center in the future. Thank you. I cede the rest of my time.
Hi, Kaylee Wolf, Limerick resident. My question is, and I think a lot of people would relate to this here, I feel like the power used to never go out, and now every single time we have any bit of a storm, it goes out. And it also always seems to happen at night when those lower sound levels are in effect. So my question is why the developer was not, I would just recommend that testing of all 288 generators at the same time, how much noise level does that create? And how often are we going to have these blackout situations, especially at night when people are trying to sleep? I know when my power goes out, I can hear my neighbor's one generator down the street. So 288 of them I think I would be able to hear. And I just have one last question, a little bit rhetorical for Mr. Campbell and Mr. Magnota. I just wonder how you sleep at night, and I hope your pillow is always like a little uncomfortably warm. Thank you.
Hi, so I want to talk a little bit about, similar to Kaylee, the noise issues. I'm not a science engineer, but I do know how to use Google without AI. In fact, I was taught how to do that in this very school. And much like the gentleman up on stage, I'm a really good multitasker when I'm supposed to be listening. I love to keep my windows open as often as possible. The local flora and fauna is a major draw to continuing to live in Limerick as I have my entire life. There was a statement made earlier that there's no noise because the pumps are underground, referring to the data center. And anybody who's ever had an old heater in a basement knows that's a load of crap. A vacuum, so again, according to Google, not an expert here, but a vacuum is around 70 dB. I don't know about anybody else. I certainly can't sleep with a vacuum on, even if it's in another room. My toddler wakes up if I try to vacuum when he's napping. I downloaded a cool app while we were talking, and the average dB in this room was 66. Didn't notice anyone sleeping. In fact, I don't think anybody feels very relaxed or at ease right now. Again, as Kaylee said, I lose power often, but at minimum after every storm, and everybody on my block has a generator. Those are louder. They run about 70 to 90 dB. So taking a walk in my neighborhood after a storm when it's nice and calm, it is so loud. You can barely hear the birds. You can't enjoy nature like you typically can. The lowest average sound train tracks make, so not the like choo-choo horn, but the tracks themselves, from about 100 feet away is 65 decibels. Someone mentioned earlier sound travels differently in the winter. I live at least 7 miles from the nearest train track, and I can hear them constantly in the winter. You mentioned earlier some of these were designed 20 years ago, designed 10 years ago and built 20. That felt like an admission that the minimum code ordinances were not in the best.
My name is Allie Sasek, and yes, I live in Limerick. And to continue the question here, if this was plans from 20 years ago, built 10 years ago, do you think this plan is ready to sit on a shelf for another 10 years? And then be just dusted off and put into action?
No, I think it's ready to go.
All right, one other question. I know you've been to the site, Mr. Campbell. From our 2 in-person experts and our 2 virtual experts, how many of you have been to the site and walked on that land? 1?
I know Mr. Tabani's been there, and I know Mr. Magnati's been there. I don't know that the sound experts have been there. I just don't know.
All right, it'd be great if, to make plans that really affect a community and an environment, if you visit that. And I think that's what's missing, not to mention someone who asked who were the owners. They can show up and they can hear what we're saying. Because if they want to make profit off of us, they can hear what the effect is, since they're probably not living around here. And then off the vibrations, is there any thought, if it's going to be so loud with vibrations, using kinetic energy to harness some of that and convert that into energy that can be used? Okay, so I'm going to guess no.
Use vibrations to
yeah,
generate
kinetic
electricity?
energy. They've done it along train tracks in Europe, but I mean, it's Europe, so they actually try.
Okay, we're not going to have anything like that. But
So I got some more time here. Possum Hollow Road, and to move that, I think that is offensive to our township. That's one of the few scenic routes that we have left. The houses along it, gorgeous, which 2 of those, I believe, would be torn down for this monstrosity. But Possum Hollow Road, please do not change that. That's offensive. And then people can hear electronic hums. Neurospicy folk, I know you know what I'm talking about, but you can hear when electronics change, when something turns on. So you think this is not going to affect people? To a lot of people with different structured brains, it will.
Martha Bell from Limerick. I'm going to try not to duplicate. I wanted to thank the Planning Commission because I understand that they're all volunteer, and I do appreciate you. First of all, with regards to the noise study, what noise study? Because you studied, like a blueprint, basically, and to take the substation out of the noise study is ridiculous. Are you going to locate the substation away from people's hearing? You need to redo the noise study and include the substations in there. Nobody's mentioned light pollution, but I think, like one of the benefits of living in Limerick is being able to look up into the sky and actually see the lights or the stars. I'm also concerned about the I understand that closed loop cooling discharges a lot of PFASs, forever chemicals, into the wastewater treatment system. To get back to what the other gentleman got cut off trying to ask, there's a cumulative effect that's going on here, and that, you know, if other people are proposing to use closed loop, that's all going to impact the ability of the local sewer system or the regional sewer system to be able to clean out the forever chemicals from our water. Secondly, you stated you're not going to draw down public water or aquifers or anything like that, but you're drawing from our public utility, which does. Our public utility draws from the rivers, and that's how we get our drinking water. And lastly, you're getting substantial tax breaks from the state, and I would propose to our Planning Commission and others that every single tax break that you get for this data center, if it comes to fruition, be given back to our community, not the school system, in terms of equal dollar-to-dollar benefit to our community.
Start her up.
Hi, Terry Arthur. I've lived in Limerick Township for 36 years. I actually live right against the Limerick Power Plant. I chose to build my house there, much to the chagrin of my family, and they thought I was crazy. It's, for the most part, been a somewhat quiet neighbor, but I've noticed an uptick in the last 10 to 15 years as more houses are built, more electric draws done. There's a hum that's louder than it's ever been. You guys are saying you're not going to put noise back in, but I thought it was a cumulative. You know, that word's being thrown around here a lot about water use. Well, your experts should be out there on my road taking that sound study first and then adding in what you're going to add into that sound. Not saying just what you are going to produce, because there's already sound there. I guess I also wanted to ask, you said your buildings, I think you changed it a couple times, were going to be 80, 85 feet tall. Does that include the chillers and the screens that you're putting on top? Or are they is that additional height?
That's why I use those two numbers. The township zoning ordinance, the definition of height does not include mechanical equipment on top of roofs.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, and I know I only have about 30 seconds, so my question really kind of goes back to this side of the room. Some of you guys I know, some of I've talked to you directly. When you allowed a data center ordinance, did you think this? Because I hope you didn't. I hope that you really, in your mind, thought that you were just going to approve a normal data center, not this hyperscale monstrosity that is going to really, really, really be detrimental to this community and your residents that put you in that position. Thank you.
We'll start the next.
Good evening. My name's Magdalena. I'm a Limerick resident. And there's something that we haven't talked about yet. And I know as a science educator, I think it's really important that we look at the most recent research for things. So I'm going to use a source. The University of Cambridge recently came out with a study. It was just published this past week about data centers as heat islands. And what they found was that about 0.3 degrees Celsius to 9.1 degrees Celsius in a radius of about an average of 4 to 6 miles around data centers, there is a noticeable increase in temperature. And that sounds super, super small when you say 0.3 to 9.1 degrees Celsius, but what is that in Fahrenheit? That's about 30 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit increase in a heat island around data centers. And this includes older data centers and modern data centers. And I think we can trust the University of Cambridge, one of the oldest scientific institutions in the world, as a reliable source. I'm not sure if the Planning Commission is aware of this new research that has come out, but this is deeply concerning, especially when we're talking about potentially having 3, 4, 5 in our area in maybe a 10-mile radius. What are we talking about there for residents who live nearby? And that's not just residents in that 400 feet area of notice that get notified for the conditional use hearing. That is people in Royersford, that's people in Spring City, that is our whole area. That is a 6-mile radius with a 30 to 50 degree Fahrenheit heat increase from these data centers? I'd love to know what you think about that.
I'll find the study. I haven't read the study.
Awesome, I can send it to you. Has the Planning Commission read this? Because I can also send you this research.
Time.
Thank you. Yeah, also, excuse me, that was cut off. I still had time.
At this point, nobody else is going to have time to speak. The Planning Commission still needs to talk and vote. So next
wait,
person, please.
I'm a Limerick resident and I get 2 minutes, right? Every other resident has gotten 2 minutes. So what was it when you cut it
you
off?
had 20 seconds extra, ma'am. Please let the next person
Excellent.
speak, or there's no more people speaking, and this is it.
I would like you to answer my question.
Okay. Public comments over.
I got one question.
That's the end.
I waited in line. My name's
We
on the
need-
sign-in sheet. I signed in.
It's not a violation.
I signed
It is
in.
not. We did allow public comment. We're up against a time constraint, and we have to conduct the business of the meeting.
Ma'am, sit down.
If they take
Ma'am.
the police, we're going to have to get involved here. I'll have, yeah, thank you. My name is Audrey Wallace. I'm a taxpayer. I grew up in Springford School District, class of 85. Go Rams. Anyway, I live in San Diego, California. Like I said, I'm a taxpayer. Limerick Township is in the national spotlight. Indiana is burning. I live next door to somebody who's an engineer at Solar Turbines. All of their solar turbines and natural gas turbines are going to Indiana, and the entire environment is on fire. It's burning. That's what he said. I said, oh my God, AI is great. It's doing all these things for me. He's like, you know what? Indiana's on fire. So please consider the amount of nuclear waste that's going into the nuclear power plant every single day. It's going into the vats that are going to crumble at some point. They're made of concrete and steel, and they're holding radioactive material. It's an on-site vat that's containing this liquid that's in Limerick Township. Don't add to it. That's what this company's doing. That's what all the AI data centers around here are doing. We're paying for this off our backs. On my electric bill at my mother's place is $666 for a 1,200 square foot place. Stop. Don't do it. This is not a good idea. Time out, please. Like I said, the radioactive waste is the biggest deal. It's the size of Springford High School football stadium, and it's going to crumble. And it was meant to be a temporary thing. This reactor was supposed to be a temporary thing. There's no 100% future plan for where that radioactive waste is. It's supposed to sit there in Limerick Township forever. And these companies are going to add to that. And more transformers are going to take up farmland that used to be precious. Every time I come in here, there's something else new going on. Time out, Limerick Township, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, USA, man. Keep it clean. This area of the country is beautiful. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name is Andrew Piasecki. Thank you for letting me speak here. My family lives adjacent to the site, so I have a lot of the same concerns as the residents here. I guess I have some questions about the Possum Hollow Road relocation. Do you know what the right-of-way for that road is? Like how wide it's going to be, or the right-of-way?
How wide the existing road is, or how wide the new road would be?
The new road. How wide will the right-of-way for the new road will be?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall what the standard cart width is, but my guess is probably about 100 feet. Yeah, with the right way beyond it. Probably 40 feet, according to my engineer to my left.
Will that extend onto the adjacent property?
No, it would be all on property that we control and own.
The entire right-of-way of the road will be on your property?
Yes.
So not an inch of my property will be touched?
Correct.
For anything? Sidewalks, ditches, nothing?
we're proposing any of the relocation on land that we control.
But even going into the future, like the entire right of the way will not be on our property.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And please go away. Thank you.
Please go away.
All right, Erica Hermans, Limerick Township resident. I did not come here tonight to prepare to speak. I came here tonight to listen, but I was moved in hearing some of these comments. So I heard a lot about the water usage, the electricity usage, the safety, but I heard little to nothing about the long-term health impacts of living near a data center. No material discussion about the ill effects created by the long-term exposure of the noise and the vibration over years and decades. I heard about the fiscal impacts and the alleged benefits to the Springport Area School District, but let me tell you what this school district is known for: high-quality special education services. Families come to this district in droves for that, and within 2 miles of this site, there are programs that are housed in our elementary schools, autistic support programs. Tell me how a child who is nonverbal, who has level 3 autism, is going to react to the noise and the vibration. I heard nothing of that. So you can put your alleged revenue aside that we will likely never see for the reason that the Planning Commission deemed earlier, because there is nothing that makes putting our community at risk that important. And I'm just going to say one more thing. I have 40 seconds. I strongly disagree with the previous speaker who said that this is inevitable and we should just change the conversation. That kind of thinking is exactly how communities lose. So I am grateful for everyone that came to the microphone tonight. If people throughout history had simply accepted what they were told was coming and stepped aside, progress would never be made. We are not obligated to move on. We are obligated to speak up. Thank you.
Beverly Dalton, resident. Thank you for allowing us to finish speaking. I just have some question comments. You talked about the closed loop water process, but then again you said it was going to use about 100,000 gallons a day. You compared it to my radiator. I don't think I've put a gallon of water in my radiator in a long time. Also, just in light of that, I've been in the area for 10 years, and the reduction of the water in Schuylkill River is unbelievable. It is frightening, absolutely frightening. You say that you'll be using public water. Where are we getting the public water from? I was trying to figure out what the upside was of all of this, and I heard the $42 million in revenue. Woo! Why doesn't that pay the power bill? Why doesn't that pay the burden that you want to put on the taxpayers? I don't understand. And something that my husband brought up that wasn't brought up was, is there a study regarding property values surrounding these data centers? What's going to happen to our property values? I know right now I can't afford to move because I can't afford to buy anything as reasonable as where I'm living now. But I'm living under the umbrella of a nuclear power plant, and now a data center that's going to possibly increase the heat that the power plant's trying to keep down, that's using the water. Holy freaking, whoa, where's the next exit? So, thank you, and thanks for allowing us to say that.
We're going to resume the meeting.
All right, at this time, the Planning Commission will make a motion to not recommend to the BOS to consider the use.
Please let him finish
Excuse me.
his motion.
Please let us finish. Not recommend to consider the use until the following conditions are met.
The first condition is that no data center or DCE on 1192 Zara Drive parcel. The second condition is that it would be a closed loop system to be used for cooling. The next condition would be that additional vibration analysis be required as Pannoni Engineering. The next is that the hum will not be perceptible beyond the boundary of any data center proposed. Next is a sound study annually. Next, to provide available existing data center sound study, which is equivalent to the design being proposed. Next is an ambient noise survey of existing conditions, and this would be prior to construction or prior to commissioning of first permit. Next is satisfy PennDOT for the relocation of Saratoga Road. The next is to satisfy the township requirement to vacate Possum Hollow Road after construction of Longview Road connector. They would ask that you strongly consider use of natural gas or an alternative rather than diesel to power the generator. The next condition would be to obtain an updated will serve letter from PA American to better or more accurately reflect the anticipated use, current within 1 year. Next would be to obtain approval / capacity letter from Aqua. We would ask that the applicant provide additional information on any use of data transmission line proposed in Chester County and how much of the use would be directly related to the data center that is proposed for this conditional use application. Next would be that the applicant submit an EMS plan to address the fire marshal concerns. Next would be that the applicant would submit to an updated FAA letter that would be current. Next is the applicant would agree to enter into a CBA to trigger if the data center gets reclassified as a public utility facility and to prevent any tax assessment appeal to adversely affect the township. Next would be the applicant would provide a decommissioning or reclamation bond to be determined by the township. And finally, a community health impact study. And the Planning Commission would ask that any township letters be complied with.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Public comments over. Thank you. Yeah. So, did we get enough votes?
You can
to pass?
adjourn.
Did the motion pass? Yeah, we voted. Okay. Yeah.
You could adjourn the meeting.
Correct.
We need.
We did vote.
Ma'am, please sit down. They are conducting official business.
We voted 8-0, right? 8-0? Again, the vote for the record, all in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes. The next meeting is going to be May 14th, 2026 at 7 p.m. back at the Township Building. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Second.